In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the radiator on your third generation 4runner, but also I'm going to show you how you can gain almost 4 extra inches of clearance in the front. Let me show you what I mean. So you'll notice that my factory skid plate is not here right now, but what I want to show you here is this right here is the radiator, and it sticks down past the frame rail by almost 4 inches, okay, just under 4 inches. And if you look at your factory skid plate, it comes kind of over here and then it drops down and then goes back. So, and it comes down just to protect your radiator, because without the skid plate, like the way I have it right now, if I'm like crawling over some rocks or something, if a rock hits my radiator, I'm done, right? Like very easy to break this thing. Then you're gonna lose all your coolant. You might even lose transmission oil because there's a trans cooler in there. The radiator that I got, it's actually shorter. It's about 18 inches in height, whereas this one is 22. So it's a 4-inch difference. When I get the radiator in here, it's going to kind of line up exactly with the frame rail, hopefully even just up from the frame rail. And then I'm gonna hopefully get a custom skid plate made that's gonna be kind of like a flat design, so it won't have to go down and, you know, protect that radiator. All right, so here's the new radiator that I will be installing. So this is just a cheap brand that I got from Amazon. I will link it in the description below. So this is actually from a first generation Tacoma, specifically the 4-cylinder models. The 4-cylinder models came with this shorter radiator, which from here to here, it's about 18 inches or just over. So these radiators came in 3 different sizes, okay? So there was the smallest one, which is the 18-inch, which is this one. There was a 20-inch, and then there was the 22-inch. On the third generation 4runner, the factory radiator was the 22-inch, the biggest one, which is why it sticks past the frame rails by the 4 inches there. So you might be thinking, you know, if the radiator is shorter, doesn't that mean that it's gonna hold less coolant? Yes, absolutely, right? It is definitely going to hold less coolant because it is smaller. Now, whether or not that's going to be a problem or not, I don't really know. Worst case scenario, the car overheats a little bit. If it does, I'll just have to replace it again. But if it does work, it's going to be amazing because I'm going to get an extra 4 or 5 inches of clearance, which is going to be huge. So first things first, we have to drain all of the coolant out. So let me show you how to do that. All right, so from the front here, here's our radiator. So just behind it, you will see this right here. That's the drain plug. So we're just gonna loosen this a little bit. We're not gonna pull it out completely, otherwise all the coolant's just gonna shoot out. So just loosen it a little bit, just enough that it starts draining. All right, so once that's finished draining, you can put that plug back in just so it doesn't leak anywhere. And now we're gonna have to drain the block, okay? So on the passenger side here, you're going to just unclip this thing right here, okay? It's like this, there's 2 clips, this one and this one. Pull it down. Now, I've heard a lot of people say how the block drain here on the passenger side, it's like impossible to find and really hard to get to or whatever. But it's really not. So I'm going to show you exactly where it is. So there it is right there. Just try to get a better, closer look. There it is, right there. And it is a 14mm bolt. And this is what I'll be using to get it. So as I said, there's a 14mm, and then I have 2 extensions. It is pretty far in there, so you will need a really long extension or just have 2 like I have. And I'll show you just how easy it is to actually get this in there. There it is. I'm on it. I know it's hard to see, but I'm on it right now. So I just have to attach my ratchet and I can get this loosened up. Just make sure that your pan is under there so it'll catch all the coolant. And we can go ahead and loosen this up. All right, so once it's all finished draining, now we can disconnect all the hoses. So up top here, it's just gonna be this one. Take this clamp off, undo that, And then over here, it's just this little clamp here, and pop that off, and that's it for the top. And then at the bottom, so we're gonna have this big one right here. Same thing, just take that clamp off and pop that off. And then we have two transmission oil lines. So it's this one right here and this one. Okay, mine might look a little bit different than yours, which I'll explain why shortly here. Once we disconnect everything, I'll show you what's going on. But it's just 3 hoses. So it's gonna be this one, pop that off, this one, and this one. Okay, now the transmission oil line, so this one and this one, when you pop them off, it will probably drip a little bit of trans oil. It's not gonna be too much, but just be aware it will leak a little bit. You could try to plug it, like once you take the hose off, you could try to plug the hole with something just so it doesn't leak too much. But yeah, just keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and get these disconnected. So next we have to take this fan shroud off, this plastic cover right here. So I believe it's just 4 bolts. There's one here, and then one just a little bit lower, and then 2 on this end here. So just one right there and one a bit lower. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so once the fan shroud is loose, I'm just gonna leave it right here, and we can take the radiator off now. So for the rad, there's these bolts holding it, but we're not actually gonna do that. There's bolts here in the front, like there's this one and just that one right there that we're gonna undo. And that's gonna release this whole, like the radiator, including this bracket, this thing right here, because the new radiator actually comes with this piece, so we don't need this. So basically, just this bolt and that bolt right there. And then same thing on this side. There's this one, and the other one's hard to see, but it's just down there. And then once you have those off, there's these hooks that will hold the weight. It'll support the weight. So once all the bolts are off, you just get these hooks off and just pop it right out. Also, I had mentioned earlier that my transmission oil lines at the bottom might look different than yours, and the reason being is I have this external transmission cooler installed. I actually have a video of this on YouTube here, but it was really long time ago. So basically, what this is, with the automatic 3rd Gen 4runners, inside of the radiator, there is a transmission oil cooler right at the bottom, like right at the bottom of the radiator. So the transmission oil goes through here and then back into the transmission. But if you've heard of the pink milkshake issue, if you haven't, just look it up on Google, you'll get the results. Basically, if your radiator is really old, they can corrode, and then like the coolant and the transmission oil can mix, and that's just bad news. So what some people do is they bypass the radiator completely and they have this external cooler. So then the transmission oil only goes through here and not the radiator. Now, that's not what I have done. So the way mine works is that the transmission oil goes through the factory cooler inside of the radiator, like this, and then it goes through the external cooler, so it just has like extra cooling, and then back into the transmission. Now, once I put my new radiator in though, since it's a cheap radiator and I don't really know how much I trust it, I am going to bypass it completely, and I'm going to have my trans oil only going through my external cooler, and then the radiator will only be for coolant. So I'll show you how I'm going to do that once we get there, but I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so it's time to put the new radiator in. One thing to note, so I am not actually putting my fan shroud back in yet. I'm gonna leave it out for the time being, and I'll explain why in a second. Basically, it's because it's too big, because you know the old radiator was bigger than this one. But anyway, we'll get to that in a little bit. I'm gonna leave it out for right now. All right, so now that the radiator is in, so I just got the upper hose here connected. This I got connected. I just had to cut it a little bit just because it's a little bit different here. Now the lower hose, this one here, I'll show from the bottom here. It's a bit easier to see. So here it is. And as you can see, it's way down here because the old radiator used to be down here. But the new one is up here. So there's no way to get this connected the way it is. But I have heard that you can make this hose work. So I'm gonna pull the hose off, and I'm just gonna try to cut it and basically try to make it like custom fit, and we'll see if it works. All right, so here's what we got. It's this one here. This is actually just another lower hose. It's the exact same one. So this is what it used to look like. And as you can see, I kind of cut it a little bit here. And then this piece was, I think, somewhere here. So I just kind of cut it up a little bit just to make it work. And, you know, it's not perfect, but it does work. And I'll be able to get those clamps on there. And we should be good to go. All right, so here is my lower hose. I got it all connected. As you can see, I've got my hose clamp back on there, as well as on this end, so it's all good to go. Now that that's in, I wanted to just quickly talk about the transmission lines. So you have two transmission lines here in the front. So if you're facing the vehicle, it's just on the left side, on the passenger side. Okay, and these are the two lines. So it's this one and this one. they both go back there and connect to the transmission. So this one, the one closer to the passenger side, is normally connected to this right here on the radiator. And then this line, the one on closer to the driver's side, comes over here and gets connected to this side of the radiator. And the way it works is this line here, the transmission oil comes out of here, goes into the transmission oil cooler inside of the radiator. It makes its way over here, gets cooled, and then it comes back out here into this hose and goes back into the transmission. To bypass this completely, instead of having this line connect to here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna replace this one with a longer hose, which I have right here. Okay, this is just 3/8 fuel line is what it's called. So this one's gonna be longer, and instead of going to here, I'm just gonna run it over this way, up, and I'll show you right over here on my transmission cooler. It's gonna get connected to this. This is actually gonna be the hose right at the top. So the oil from the transmission will come up, make its way up into here, into the cooler. It'll go down the cooler, and then that line right there, the bottom one is going to be this one here. So basically we're just replacing it. So this one will now be this one at the top. And then this one here would be the bottom of the transmission cooler. So let me get this done and then I'll show you what it looks like. All right guys, so I got it all connected. So the top line is going down. I just put it through this hole right here in the front. It's going down, and it is this line right here. Okay, so it's gonna be the one closer to the passenger side, this one here. Okay, this one is the top one. And then the bottom one, just at the bottom of the external cooler, same thing, goes that way. And it is this one here. So it's gonna be the one right next to that one, okay? And as you can see, there's nothing connected to the radiator on either side. So there's not going to be any transmission oil going into the factory cooler at all. So that is how you bypass the factory cooler and just use the external one. I also just put a couple zip ties right here just to keep things nice and tidy. I don't think that's going anywhere, so we're good to go. All right guys, so we are ready to fill the radiator up. So I went ahead and bought some of this coolant concentrate directly from Toyota. I'm not gonna do the 50-50 mix anymore because it's too cold here. So I'm gonna do 60% of this concentrate and then 40% distilled water. And I have my measuring cup here. I'm gonna just measure it all myself. So I just have an empty jug, and that's where I'm gonna be mixing this and the distilled water, and then we'll get the radiator filled up. All right, so my 60-40 mix is ready. I'm just gonna start filling it up until it's full, and then I'll start up the engine. It'll suck in more coolant, and then I can add more. The owner's manual says that it needs about 8 liters, I believe, but it's probably gonna be a bit less than that because first of all, the radiator is smaller, plus there's probably a little bit of coolant left over in the engine. So yeah, we'll just fill it up until it's full. And then this thing I'm using, I forget what it's called, but it's for filling up your radiator. Comes with like a cap and everything, so you won't make a mess. Basically, I can fill this up, and then once it's full, I can push this plunger down and take this whole thing off without making a mess and spilling everywhere. So yeah, it's nice, but you don't have to use that. So let's go ahead and fill this up. All right, so I got this thing full. This didn't work, unfortunately. I didn't have the right cap for it, so it started leaking. So it kind of sucks, but that's okay. I'm just gonna leave it as is. I'm gonna start up the engine, let some air bubbles come out, and then I'll just kind of monitor it every time the level gets down. I'll just keep filling it up. I also have the front of my vehicle jacked up a little bit because that helps get some of the air bubbles out. So I'm gonna start it up right now. I'm gonna have to leave it running for a little bit of time. I gotta let it get to operating temperature, and then once it does, I'm gonna just turn the heat on, blast the heat, just let the coolant go through everything. And yeah, we'll just keep running it until there's no more air bubbles coming out, and then we'll be all done. So let's get it started. Alright, so we are at operating temperature. I have the heat blasting right now, and I'm pretty sure we are, I don't think there's any more air bubbles coming out. So I think we can shut this off, just fill this up to the full line, and we are all done. Alright, so I got my radiator cap back on, and we're all good to go now. My other radiator cap didn't actually fit on this radiator, so I had to order this new cap from Rock Auto, and this is for a first generation Tacoma with the 4-cylinder engine, same thing as where the radiator is from. So we're gonna go for a drive right now, just make sure everything is good, make sure nothing's leaking, and we'll be all set. And one more quick thing before I go for a drive, I had mentioned that I'm leaving the fan shroud out. So I did leave it out, I haven't put it back in. I'm actually gonna be driving it without the fan shroud for now. I will eventually put it back in. It's just right now, as I mentioned, it's too long. If I put it in as is, it's gonna stick past the frame rails. So I'm gonna just try to customize it, just gonna try to cut it up and see if I can make it work, but it's not priority, so I'm just gonna do that at a later time. For now, it should be perfectly fine without the fan shroud. So let's go for a drive. Feels good to be back on the road driving my 4runner, but yeah, I've been driving for about 20 minutes now, and everything seems to be good. My temperature gauge is right where it needs to be. I put it in 4x4 for a while as well, just to see if it overheats at all. Everything's good. Now obviously I'm just doing some city driving, so if I'm off-roading in 4x4 for long periods of time, it might be a little different, I don't know. If it does overheat or if I have any troubles, I will make an updated video, but I'm pretty hopeful. I think we're gonna be good. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.